Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Tech Capital Roundtable, How to Cool AI and Innovation Sustainability. I'm delighted to have you join us today for what promises to be a timely and insightful discussion. As we all know, the acceleration of AI is reshaping industries at an incredible pace. But alongside the opportunity, there are pressing challenges, especially when it comes to energy use, cooling, and sustainability. Today, we'll explore how global innovation is evolving, the role of liquid cooling in meeting rising compute demands, and how partnerships and new solutions are shaping the future of data centers. We are joined by a fantastic group of experts, including Nirupa Chander, Senior Vice President of Secure Power and Data Centers International at Schneider Electric, Rich Whitmore, President and CEO of Motivair, and Andrew Brunner, General Manager for Schneider Electric's cooling business. And with that said, let's dive right in. Nirupa, could you start us off with a global perspective on the current landscape, what you're seeing across regions when it comes to AI demands, innovation drivers, and how businesses are responding?
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Percy, for having us here today. So it's a very exciting time in the world, and I cover quite an exciting region, let's say the global south, and a lot happening in this space. You can see that with AI, it's starting to become a part of national priority, and you can see many countries starting to take a leading position on artificial intelligence and building out sovereign AI clouds and infrastructure in their countries. And, I'm based out of Dubai, so UAE, Saudi, the Middle East is definitely taking a pretty leading position. But we see lots of good activity in India with, some major announcements around build out of major AI infrastructure by big players like Microsoft and others. And of course, Asia Pacific continues to be a key growth driver as well. So a lot linked to AI becoming a topic of national priority and sovereign AI becoming a key priority in terms of build out of infrastructure in the countries. And it's also still kind of early days in terms of AI applications. We're just starting to scratch the surface. Obviously, Gen AI takes up a lot of, we talk a lot about Gen AI, let's say, but in fact, there's still a lot of use cases which are yet to even be discovered, whether it's in applications in healthcare, biomedical, fintech, literally every industry that we can touch, and even energy, in fact. So lots yet to be seen in terms of what AI can do for this part of the world.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, we are just at the tip of the iceberg with all this. We don't even know how deep the iceberg goes when it comes to AI. I mean, and you touched on one of the big S's of the moment, which is sovereignty, which is making headlines all over the world, and it's a big driver for infrastructure development. But I guess also when it comes to developing this infrastructure, I mean, AI is changing the architecture of the data center, it's changing the workloads, it's changing the pressure on the infrastructure that we've built to date. All this demand is also changing how we have to build data centers because the workloads are changing, like you mentioned. The weight lifting that it has to do today, it's not what it had to do in 2015, for instance. That's changing the architecture, how we build a data center and how we cool it down as well. So when the technology that everyone is looking at now, it's liquid cooling. It's not a secret for anyone. How do you guys see liquid cooling making an entry into the data center space? What are the benefits versus the older technology? So if we look at the adiabatic cooling, if we look at cold and hot aisles, what are the benefits of liquid cooling in an AI reality?
Yeah, I mean, I'll let Rich comment on liquid cooling, being the expert here. But in general, with what's happening on the compute side, the densification of architectures of GPUs and the amount of now kilowatts that are running in each rack requires a new architecture for both power and cooling. So there's a lot happening in that space as well. And now with the GPU architectures and some of the new roadmaps that NVIDIA is launching and continues to show for the future, it's clear that liquid cooling is the most efficient way to cool AI workload and compute, basically.
And so, sorry, Rich, I'm going to interrupt there, but this is actually a question for everyone. When you guys talk to your clients, what sort of kilowatts per rack are you already hearing about for the present, and what they're planning for the next 12, 24 months? Because we went from some very small numbers to some people 30 kilowatts, 50 kilowatts. Some people are talking about 100. Then it comes to it. Some people are already talking about 300 in the US, especially for the neo clouds. I mean, these are tremendous changes to the hardware. But on the ground, what are you hearing in terms of kilowatts?
So we're already starting to see in inference applications at the edge where our customers are deploying 30, 40, 50, 70 kilowatts, so sub 100, and then bigger clusters being created of over 100 kilowatts per rack. And then again, I'll invite Andrew and Rich to add, but if you look at NVIDIA's latest roadmaps, it's going to be touching up to 1,000 kilowatts per rack as well. So.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, I went to a conference with Jensen and he showed one of those machines that he's got now, one of the new toys. I mean, it's just incredible. The whole internet is in a little 70-centimeter device. But sorry, Richard, coming to you.
Yeah, I'll go back to one of the original questions there, which is, liquid cooling playing an important role in this AI era. And liquid cooling, there's nothing new there. Okay, liquid cooling has actually been around for decades, and Motivair has been doing it at scale for the last 10 to 15 years. What we're seeing now is the silicon roadmaps and the density at the chassis level in the servers themselves. It requires liquid cooling. It doesn't mean that you couldn't do air cooling, but the amount of air you'd have to move through those servers, it's just not practical. So liquid cooling really becomes the de facto and the only way to cool these servers in order to allow them to operate at peak performance. And the benefit, of course, is that you're actually doing it very efficiently. But when you look at where the roadmaps are going, you mentioned Jensen's latest toy. There is no question that 1 megawatt racks are on the near-term horizon. And from Motivair's perspective, everything that you see in the market today, and quite frankly, anything that you see on publicly available roadmaps, Motivair has been doing that actually for more than a decade, right? Dense 300, 400, 500 kW liquid-cooled racks. That is where Motivair developed its expertise, and its brand around the world is for doing the most advanced compute and cooling it on pretty much every continent in the world.
And Andrew, would you like to add something on the liquid cooling front?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think Nirupa and Rich have spoken about what the NVIDIA roadmap looks like. And I think your question about what are customers asking for today, I think for sure almost all of them are asking for a minimum of 130 to 150 kilowatts a rack. Many are looking at flexibility. So they're thinking about 200, 300. That presents some of its own challenges of, do you install that infrastructure? Are you ready for it? Being flexible enough for that may have some negative implications, especially as you see some of the compute suppliers saying, bring some of the CDUs in that infrastructure closer to the compute, right, to be able to react and respond to it more effectively. I think Nirupa's comment about densification is important, but when we think about the scale of deployment, right, and you talk about these larger scales, yeah, we can handle 100 kilowatts a rack or 300 kilowatts a rack, or maybe 1 megawatt in isolation. But when you talk about these campuses that are being discussed, the neocloud players and others, they're talking about 1 gigawatt campuses. And those are very different conversations to have. It goes beyond just maybe infrastructure, but access to power. What does that mean more broadly for society with access to power questions, access to water questions, and the broader consumption in general for data centers? And that's something that Schneider Electric as a whole is looking to solve as well. Not only the immediate issue of how do I densify a rack and support that, but what does that mean more broadly for society?
Yeah, I mean, when you look at those projects, it's I call it crazy what's happening around the world, because you look at, for example, what Scali is doing in El Dorado, in Brazil, which Schneider is helping to develop. I mean, that's not even a 1 gigawatt campus. That's something completely new. It's an AI city. It's several gigawatts of data center power. It's nearly $100 billion of investment just for one campus. So we are entering a whole new era when it comes to development of this infrastructure. But before I go into more details around Motivair, because I'm quite interested in some details about what you guys do, Rich. Just when you look into the geographies and you have these conversations around liquid cooling, are there any major differences in deploying liquid cooling in different regions, or is it quite a straightforward technology that can work anywhere?
I think from my perspective, the many of the large hyperscalers or the server OEMs, they're looking to standardize on the inside of the data center wherever possible. But obviously, there are differences in the broader cooling technology that you would use to remove the heat out of the building, depending on where in the world you're putting it. If you're up in the Nordics, that presents some opportunities for some free cooling and some economization. Completely on the opposite side of the world, if you're doing it in Arizona, you're going to be more thoughtful about the cooling technology that's outside the data center to remove it. So there are differences there, but ideally, we're looking to standardize as much as possible inside the white space so the customers are getting a consistent product portfolio there.
And then, Nirbi, did you want to add something to what Rich said?
No, I think he summed it up well. Really, it's inside of the data center is more and more getting standardized.
Okay, and then Rich, so just on Motivair quickly, because you've already said that liquid cooling, it's not a new thing, it's been around for decades. Motivair is also not very new. How has the company had to evolve over the years to really address this market? Was there an inflection point at some point in time where you had to be like, right, the world is changing, we need to make an executive decision, we're going to follow this route to get where you are now and to be able to develop things there?
We did. If I go back about 10 or 15 years, we were and continue to be, but we were highly focused on high performance computing, supercomputing. At the time, it was traditionally air cooled, very densely air cooled, but still air cooled. And we were literally in the room when the inflection point happened, where we were looking at the silicon roadmaps and what was happening, and we knew back in 2014, 2015 that the world was going to be going towards liquid cooling. And that's when we developed our product portfolio to lean into that trend. And it was only really when the ChatGPTs of the world went live that everyone turned and said, oh my goodness, this is all going to be very dense liquid cooled. How do we do this? And a lot of people turn to us to help them with that. So it's something that we've been very close to for quite some time. And really, it leads me to the other point I was going to make is we build these product roadmaps based on silicon out, because that's really what's driving today's data center designs, both for power and cooling. Historically, you would build a data center and then fill it up with whatever compute the customer is looking to go, maybe a colo or something like that. But realistically, with these very dense systems, the data centers have to be designed to accommodate these high density servers and high wattage processors.
And you took the approach very early on, and it's been very interesting to see, even on our side from a media perspective, how liquid cooling was sort of treated in the mid 2010s. Sort of back of the house, like go to that side of the conference floor, not really getting involved. And then suddenly, especially in the last 2-3 years, the world spotlight really shining on liquid cooling. It's been an interesting journey to see how that's working out. I was actually going to ask what you think is going to be the next technology, but I don't think we need to go into the next after liquid cooling at now, unless you're already looking at something you want to share.
Well, we're always looking and studying and investing with R&D and things of that nature. But if you look at the foreseeable future on every single silicon roadmap that's public, right? All of it is single phase, direct chip liquid. And it is that way for a very clear reason. It's scalable, meaning you can deploy it in any geography in the world, and it's understood. It's not regulated per se, as some refrigerants could be in different places. And it's consistent, and you can get serviceability and tech support, right? You're not doing special training for people on refrigerants or other substances. And so it provides a baseline of consistency and reliability that's really required for these types of systems. When you have and it's public, you've got hyperscalers investing billions and billions of dollars per quarter, right? That has to be backed up by qualified, resilient, tested, proven cooling technologies that can scale. And that's really what's driving everything. And from a thermodynamic perspective, as people start to dig into this, and of course we've known it for years, but our job now is to help educate the world as best as possible. If you look at the ability of single phase direct to chip, it can remove north of 1,500 watt processors without a problem. So anything that you're seeing on the roadmap today, from a silicon perspective, it's all being designed for single phase direct to chip.
Very, very interesting, very interesting. And I think the other aspect of all this is that no one winner can take it all. Because, and again, things are changing so fast. I don't think any company can actually survive doing it all on its own. And I guess that's why we're here as well, because Schneider Motivair joined forces to really address the side of the market. How do you, I mean, talk us through the timeline. How did the partnership come about to begin with? What have you learned from each other so far? Is there anything that you would have changed already in the partnership? But and then we can look into the future. How is this going to develop? What other things are going to be working on? How are you going to package what's going to come out to market as well? But let's take a step back and understand how did you get together?
Sure. Well, I'll take part of this question, then I'll throw it to Andrew and let him put some of his color to it as well. So as I mentioned, Motivair has been so highly focused on HPC and advanced AI for a very long time, really leading the industry in liquid cooling. I think we're currently cooling 6 of the 10 top supercomputers in the world, and dozens more all over the place. When we were looking at the growth in front of us, Motivair had plans to add factory capacity in Europe and in Asia Pac. But when you start to see how fast the market was moving, we said, look, we actually need to move faster than even our fastest plans could do that. And so we went and looked into the market to find a partner that had scale, that had true expertise and leadership in the data center environment, that had a culture that matched our culture. And as we rendered it down, and we had a long list of choices that we could have partnered with, really Schneider Electric really rose to the top. And every meeting that we had with them, the bond and the clarity became better and better. And so for us, the combination of Motivair's expertise in liquid cooling at the server level and inside the white space, combined with Schneider's scale and Schneider's expertise in advanced power, it allows us to fill this gap inside the Schneider offering, where now, as I call myself part of Schneider Electric, which I am, we are able to work with customers at the grid level, literally helping them do the studies to analyze where the best place is to get power, and then move that power into the data center, move that power into a server, and when that power is converted to heat, remove it from the server and take it all the way outside of the data center. So we call that grid to chip and chip to chiller. But generally speaking, it's a complete end-to-end solution that's available globally from multiple factories in different regions. So you're getting consistency that we talked about earlier, but you're getting coverage that allows our largest customers to deal with us in unique geographies with teams that are specialized and focused on not just liquid cooling, but this whole AI infrastructure.
I love that. I on a personal, I think it's very mature for a business to understand that, this is moving very fast. We can't do it ourselves, not do it on our own. And you go and look for a partner, because so many people out there just want to go in their own lane. They'll push, and then they just get overrun very quickly. So it's very mature to get to a point where the business decides, we need to partner. We need to go and find help outside our organization to do this. So kudos on that front. It's there's always a good business story somewhere, some good takeaways, even for other businesses and smaller businesses as well. Yeah. But sorry, back to the to the topic. I don't know, Andrew, Nirupa, one of you wants to add the Schneider side?
Yeah, I mean, I can add a little bit of it, and for sure, before ChatGPT really became public, Motivair was on our map, right? So while we did not participate as much in the high performance compute space, Motivair was well known to us in terms of their experience there, and really the strength of what they did in that space and how they worked with that ecosystem of partners. I would also say, as we went through this process, and it wasn't, Rich gave a very nice story of how it was very clear to Motivair. On the Schneider side, I will say in the pursuit side, it's never quite as clear because you're not in the leading position to make the decision. But it was very clear to Schneider that Motivair was the partner for us for many of the same reasons that Rich mentioned, including bringing a portfolio that is broad and deep, probably the broadest and deepest in the industry, to complete that grid to chip, chip to chiller story for us. Right, we had that with outdoor heat rejection. We had that in the cooling side with very efficient air cooling with our CRAHs and fan walls. But having that deep experience and knowledge and portfolio on the liquid cooling side and proven experience deploying 400, 500 kilowatt racks was not available in the market and really doesn't exist anywhere else in the market. So for us, that was very important. The culture piece, as Rich mentioned, was a clear match. With each successive meeting we had, became clear that we had shared ideas, shared philosophies, and really that it was how do we kind of make this partnership move forward. The other thing from a Schneider perspective is you asked about the regionalization. As you know, North America is the single largest AI market, right? So largest data center market, but when you amplify AI on top of that, is probably somewhere between 75 and 80% of the deployed market today. And Motivair having that footprint in North America was especially important. I think even more important now. That is a very important piece for us to have a competency center, both from an innovation and design standpoint in the U.S., manufacturing footprint in the U.S., but that proven execution service capabilities in the U.S. So really very much, we had a customer say a match made in heaven. And there is a shared history when you look at, I'm sitting in Italy at the Uniflare headquarters. Both companies were founded in 1988. Some similar stories. Rich's father, Graham, very much knew the leadership at Uniflare pre-acquisition. So there were a lot of common themes that we could talk about as we talked about what would it mean for an acquisition? How does a company come into Schneider and being able to share those experiences? And we're taking those learnings to try to make this one as successful as possible. And I think we're headed in the right direction.
Yeah, and if you allow me, sorry, I would still add probably the R&D track record as well, because I think especially in a space like this, it is important to keep investing in just research. Doesn't mean that everything gets launched, but in investing in understanding what could work and what could come next, it's also a big part of it. And I've seen Schneider's R&D facilities, which are bigger than some factories of other players in the market alone. So that's also another big match, I think, when it comes to these two companies. But sorry, Nirupa, if you want to add something.
Yeah, not much to add other than we're super excited to have Motivair in our portfolio and Motivair's team as well. So, and within international, we've already had successful launch events of the portfolio in our region, and must say customer feedback feedback has been extremely positive. The other thing I'd just add is that we've also really already started ramping up our execution capabilities in the region around deploying this infrastructure. And Andrew mentioned about regionalization of our industrial footprint as well. So we're really raring to go in this region and ready with Motivair now.
Okay, and then I guess I love geography, so I'm always kind of default back to geography questions. When you look into the different markets, so for example, Andrew, you were mentioning that North America is the biggest market, and it is, and at least it will probably be for the next 2-3 years around AI until Europe figures itself out in a way. When you look into the markets, so for the offers you're going to be putting out there, you're going to be marketing to clients, you're going to be pushing to markets. Will there be any differences between more mature markets? Will you be developing something for less mature markets, more emerging markets? So for example, like North America versus Brazil, for instance. Are you going to be taking care of them in different ways when it comes to pushing the offers out?
I don't know if there's going to be a different strategy per se in each region in terms of the offer. Now, what we are seeing is some regionalization where there's availability of silicon, right? So as Rich said, we start with the silicon and the compute, and then we work out from there. Much of the white space solution or the IT solution, and we consider the CDU part of the IT solution, right? It's delivering fluid that's going in to cool inside the servers, and it's an integral part of that. You're seeing maybe different capacities because maybe they're a half generation or a generation behind in terms of what's available. And some markets may be sourcing that from a cost efficiency standpoint or availability standpoint. So that's where we see some variation, is really around the availability of the silicon. Really where we're trying to look at the regionalization, and Rich talked about it in one of the motivators for looking at potential sale of the business to scale, is building the industrial footprint, the service footprint, and execution footprint closer to the customer and where it's getting deployed. And that's really where we're making many of our investments today, in coordination with Nirupa's teams and our services organizations to build that. So, leveraging the multi-region industrial footprint we have between what we have in North America now, what we have in Europe, what we have in India and Asia Pacific, as well as in China, because there is a part of the business that we're servicing into China with our China organization, being able to best service, routes to market, supply lines, lead times, and then ensuring that where we're focused on seeing the highest priority countries and clusters, and again, working closely with Nirupa and her region international, where we're seeing the largest GPU deployments. And you see some countries stand out in each region. You talked about Europe. You kind of see France standing out, some of that sovereignty, some of that's the government level investment. We're seeing some things happening in Middle East. Australia and Asia Pacific is very strong. So we're seeing these pockets where we want to accelerate investments along those lines and ensure that it's not only a portfolio conversation, but it's supply capacity, lead time, and then the execution and service capability.
Interesting. Nirupa, let me bring that to you now. When you look into the regions, so Andrew was talking about France for Europe, Australia for APAC. Skip the tier 1 countries. What's within the tier 2 range? What's the country that you think is really going to come out big in the next 12, 24 months when it comes to AI deployments?
So big clusters of AI, we see projects already announced, and that's public information, in UAE, in Saudi, India, in parts of Asia Pacific. So Japan, Korea, Singapore are all very exciting markets as well, and Australia. So I'd say these are and you mentioned, in fact, Brazil with the AI City project as well. So there are, let's say 10, 12 countries which are starting to take a pretty leading position in build out of major infrastructure around AI.
Yeah. And a lot of them big countries, which is very interesting as well, because it's a new world.
well, I think the other piece, and I teased it, is availability of energy, right, and power, and especially when you're talking about training as well, less relying on latency issues and being close to the usage, right? Really, that's where we get into the inferencing. So a lot of these large training centers can be put in those countries, and some of it is driven by sovereignty, but some of it is driven by where is access to power, even if it's not ideal for maybe the outdoor heat rejection, as Rich said, right? Arizona maybe not the greatest place, Saudi Arabia might not be the greatest place, but there's an abundance of energy in those locations.
Yeah, and then there are other pockets like Brazil where there's abundance of green power. That's where they're also quite well positioned to build out. And I just linked to also like the national strategy in some of these countries is also driving the demand as well, right? Many of the countries are building their own LLMs, right? So then that requires build out of this infrastructure. So it's also, so you've got to see, what is the source of the demand, and then you start seeing where the pockets of growth will be.
How much government conversations are you guys having in terms of helping them develop these LLMs and build data centers? Are you dealing directly with governments, or are you more focused on the operational side, and then you talk to the people building the data centers as opposed to directly with the government?
Yeah, I think the conversations around AI is there every day in all the press, and everyone's talking about it. But what doesn't get talked about enough is like how to build out this physical infrastructure, right? So we're the physical infrastructure folks, and there's a realization now that to have AI in your national strategy means you've got to build this infrastructure for which you're going to need power, water, and other resources as well. So I think that's where we're getting engaged in terms of build out of local capabilities to serve that demand as well, and also to support and guide the country's strategy on what this infrastructure could look like.
Okay. I think also one of the big challenges of all this, which is an opportunity in itself, is the speed at which things are moving. So we can follow the energy, we can follow the demands, but technology is outpacing what we can put out there into markets, and even the supply chain side of things, just on the back of a lot of demand. So it's not, again, it's a problem, it's a good problem to have, but we need more. How do you keep up with coming up with something in the space of 6 months, 2 years, when before you probably had 5-10 years to develop, study, understand? There's a lot more unanswered questions, even just to get internal budgets. It's probably a harder conversation, because like, well, we're trying to develop something that maybe in 6 months' time we're going to have to scrap, because we're going to have to develop something else because that's already obsolete. How do you manage that? How do you manage uncertainty in the midst of so much opportunity as well?
I'll start with the response there, because we find ourselves directly at that chip level. So to be fair, there's not much that surprises us. I always say once you've heard it in the news, you realize how late you are. All right. So when you're working deeply at the chip level, deeply with the server designers and manufacturers, there is no deployment of that technology without the proper power and cooling. So when it hits the street, when you hear this news about a big data center going here or there, or a new silicon development that's coming out, inevitably we've probably been working on that for 6, 12, 18 months. The challenge is to be at the same time talking about that. The challenge is that roadmaps, silicon roadmaps, used to rotate on about an 18 to 24 month cycle. And I can tell you that was still accelerated from the high performance computing and supercomputing industry, because we would always be getting it first. Right? It always goes to that industry first, and then it kind of becomes more commercialized after a few years. But the challenge in the industry today is you're building infrastructure, and what are you going to do with that infrastructure as things change? And there's ongoing conversations with customers as to how they can either repurpose or reset the densification in those sites. But a lot of it is driven by speed. So it starts with the product development, like I mentioned. So from Motivair's perspective, we have product available basically for the next 2 generations of silicon. It's already in the works. So there's nothing that's coming down the line that Motivair, especially combined with Schneider, cannot manage, period, right? And then it's a matter of how quickly can customers deploy and scale this, right? So when you look at like Nirupa and her teams from international, we've had hundreds of people from her divisions through Buffalo inside Motivair being trained on how to deploy this stuff. And then if you loop that in with what Schneider offers, that we're now a part of with prefabricated facilities, we've got the product technology, we've got the core cooling and power, all right? And now how do we help these customers go quickly? Because when they sign a contract, when they want to go, the rest of us in the industry have to be ready. And that's, I think, one of the biggest opportunities when customers are working with Schneider is like, this is not new for us. This is what we've done collectively for a long time. So when we deploy at scale, and we can do it quickly.
Yeah, I would maybe add to this that, the partnerships that Rich is talking about are really integral to being able to deploy. So for the silicon manufacturers and the leading ones today, for them to ship more GPUs and to ship the next generation, really the infrastructure needs to be in place. So the type of engagements that we're having, at Schneider Electric with those leading companies is very important. Some of the things that we're doing are just helping customers deploy today, right? So some of the reference designs that we're developing together with NVIDIA and releasing around the GB300, very important to help customers understand how do we deploy today with the blueprint that can help us address going out to market, rather than just, hey, it's possible. This is a clear blueprint on how to do that. Now, that may not be how they deploy, but that can help. Again, supply chain is a big part of those partnership conversations. How do you have enough infrastructure available in the market to ship that many IT systems? In the past, as Rich explained, when you had an air-cooled data hall, you really didn't care about the IT systems that were going in there. It was very flexible. Maybe you changed some set points on the air temperatures and you could handle different densities. Today, you can't do that. The infrastructure very much needs to be matched or support the specific compute that's going into those rooms. And really that having the supply chain available combined with advanced view on what the roadmaps are, and already the experience as Rich alluded to and talked about with the 400 and 500 kilowatt racks for the next several generations, we have proven solutions that have been in the market for 8 to 10 years already. And it's really working with them on what's beyond that, what's out to 2030, and how do we do that not only on a cooling standpoint, but a power infrastructure as well, and make it practical to deploy. And I think that's where Schneider brings a lot of added value to the server vendors as well as the silicon manufacturers to say, how can you practically deploy this with the needed supply chain and scale and serviceability that's required by the market?
Yeah, absolutely. And Nirupa, would you like to add something to what Rich and Andrew said?
There's not much more to add. They've covered it, but I just say that we're in a very interesting time. I started by saying that it's very exciting times because the cooperation and that's required between the different stakeholders in this entire ecosystem, we've never seen it before, right? So we don't sell much to NVIDIA. NVIDIA doesn't sell much to us, but if we're not talking to each other, none of this AI story can scale. So I think that's what Rich said is really important, that we're working very closely on the roadmaps, and then our innovation cycle has to work lock in step with their innovation cycle. So I think this partnership story is super important to understand. And then of course, finally, we have to be able to keep delivering these new innovative solutions to the market at speed as well.
No, 100%. And I think the other layer, despite we are talking about technology, AI, racks with a lot more density and everything, it's still a very people-led conversation. It's still a very people-led change and development, construction. So the teams talking to each other, training the teams, the decision of Motivair to go and look for someone, it's all very much still human-led. So there's still a human story as well, which in day and age, I wouldn't say this 3 or 4 years ago, but I think the day and age that we live in, I think it's important to highlight that humans are still driving some of this. But look, guys, I'm not going to take much more of your time. Just looking to the short term, because I mean we're coming up to the end of 2025 as well. We're going to go into an extreme 2026 with a lot of construction. I personally feel this year and last year, but especially this year, there's been a lot of conversation around AI. I feel the next 24 months are very much going to be about building it. It's going to be about go out there, do the thing. Maybe a little bit less talking new technology and everything, but it's going to be very much let's get our hands dirty and build this. But in the short term, the next 3-6 months, what are you keeping an eye on? What do you think is going to happen in the market? Can be any region, can be global, can be any technology, can be any deal, can be anything. But what's your take like for the next 3-6 months?
Yeah, I mean, I think for us in international, we expect to see a very robust growth ahead of us in the coming couple of years, as many of the investment decisions have been made in 2025. So that's what we're going to be following closely. What's on my mind is really capability and capacity to continue to build our capability and capacity to serve that demand in this region.
Interesting. And Richard? Rich?
Yeah, from our perspective, it's really about execution. So this wave of AI and the demand that everyone's seeing, we're well prepared for it. We have tons of factory capacity. We're now building on 3 different continents, so we can manage really anything that any customer needs. For us, it's about execution and continuing our journey with coming into the world of Schneider Electric.
And Andrew?
Yeah, I would echo what Rich has said. Really, it's around customer journeys, right? So you talked about the sharing of learnings that we've had. A lot of people looking for a better understanding of how to deploy, how to commission, the experiences that Motivair and Rich and the team have had out of Buffalo. The supply chain availability. Obviously, we're working on a lot of industrial transfers. That's key to being able to have the supply available for the deployments. And then most importantly, the service capabilities and execution capabilities, right? That's the piece working with Nirupa and Rich and our combined teams. How do we ensure that we have the right service capabilities in the countries that matter most, but also as we see this continue to scale beyond the next 3 to 6 months across all the geographies where people are looking to deploy.
And I think in the longer term, and running the risk of going a bit of piece here, but it's the fact that these discussions, it will define humanity as well in the decades to come. And maybe over 100. Well, it will have an impact 100 plus years in our way. This is a whole new industrial revolution. It's probably going to have even more impact than the industrial revolution did in the 19th century. So I think all these conversations are very important. And it would be good to maybe sit down in 12 months' time or 24 months' time and look back and see how much it will have changed. And also actually focus on the things that we can't even think now. Because I'm sure in 12 months' time, something will have happened that we can't even think today. And that's how fast everything is moving. It's no longer years. It's just a few months. But I'm not going to take more of your time. So Nirupa, Rich, and Andrew, thanks so much for your time. It's always a pleasure speaking to you. As for your home, thank you for watching, and do check our website and social media for the latest global digital infrastructure news from across the globe. At the Tech Capital, you lead, we report. Bye for now.